You share a bed. You share a name. You share the quiet mornings and the heavy silences of the evening. But the one thing you thought would bind you together, the intimacy, has become a ghost in the house. You don't talk about it, because to talk about it would be to admit that something is missing. And admitting something is missing feels like admitting the marriage is broken. But what if the absence itself is trying to tell you something? What if your biology isn't betraying you, but is instead speaking a language you've forgotten how to hear? You lie next to them, and the distance feels infinite. You wonder, is it me? Is it them? Did we skip a chapter? In the beginning, desire was easy. It was a fire. But now the fire is out, and you're left standing in the ashes, holding a checklist of reasons. We're tired. We're stressed. We're co-parents, not lovers. The timing is never right. You tell yourself it's normal, that all marriages cool down. But deep down, you feel a quiet shame, a sense that you've failed at something fundamental. You start to wonder if you're broken or if you chose the wrong person. But here is where psychology asks you to pause. The absence of sex is rarely about the sex itself. You are not broken. The marriage is not necessarily broken. What you are experiencing is a symptom, a signal from a system that has fallen out of alignment. In psychology, we often look at the presenting problem. The patient comes in and says, "We don't have sex," and we nod. But we don't stop there, because the brain doesn't work in straight lines. It works in circuits, and somewhere in that circuit, a switch has been flipped to off. But here's the paradox. The more you obsess over the lack of sex, the more you pressure the system, the more the switch stays off. You are trying to force a flower to bloom by pulling on the petals. To understand why desire disappears, you have to understand how the brain maps relationships. Think of your brain as a path cutter in a dense forest. When you first met your partner, your brain was in exploration mode. Every touch, every glance, every moment of uncertainty, it released dopamine. It was novel, it was exciting. The path to desire was wide and clear. But marriage, by design, signals safety to the brain. Safety is the opposite of novelty. The brain says, we have secured the mate. We can stop hunting now. Let's focus on survival. This is the Coolidge effect in reverse. The brain prunes the neural pathways associated with sexual pursuit because it assumes the goal is achieved. The path to desire becomes overgrown, not because you don't love each other, but because your brain has categorized your partner as furniture, a safe, predictable part of the background. Desire doesn't die from hatred. It dies from familiarity. The brain stops releasing the chemicals of pursuit because it believes the chase is over. So how do you clear the path? Not by force, but by tricking the brain back into exploration mode. Here are 4 principles grounded in psychology to gently reintroduce desire. 1. Separate attachment from desire. Attachment is the calm and connect system. It's oxytocin. It's the feeling of safety when they hold your hand. Desire is the pursuit and conquest system. It's testosterone and dopamine. The tragedy is these two systems often inhibit each other. You can feel too safe, too comfortable, too much like siblings. To invite desire back, you must allow a little psychological distance. Not emotional distance, but a reintroduction of mystery. You must see your partner as someone who could choose to leave. 2. The principle of good enough sex. Performance anxiety kills desire faster than anything. When sex becomes a metric, a test of the marriage's health, the brain enters a state of threat detection. You can't be aroused and anxious at the same time. This is the spinal reflex versus cortical control. You have to take sex off the pedestal. Aim for connection, not fireworks. Aim for good enough. When the pressure is off, the parasympathetic nervous system engages, and that is the garden where desire grows. 3. Schedule the accident. It sounds unromantic, but psychology knows that spontaneity is a myth. In long-term relationships, desire is intentional. The brain is lazy. It will take the path of least resistance, which is the path to sleep or to the phone or to the TV. You have to physically create the conditions for the brain to switch modes. Scheduling intimacy isn't robotic. It's building a trellis for the vine to climb. You are telling your brain, at this time we explore. We become hunters again. 4. Externalize the problem, not the blame. When you say we don't have sex, the brain wants to find a culprit. It's your fault. It's my fault. This creates a shame loop. Instead, look at the system, the job, the kids, the phones, the unresolved resentment. These are not character flaws. They are environmental toxins to desire. You are not fighting each other. You are fighting the entropy of modern life. Once you stand on the same side of the battlefield, the dynamic shifts. So here is the simple mental model. Think of your marriage as a garden. You've been staring at the one flower that isn't blooming, convinced it means the soil is poisoned. But you haven't looked at the wall around the garden that is blocking the sun. You haven't noticed the path has been covered by weeds of routine. The flower isn't the problem. The flower is the messenger. The absence of sex is a silence. And in that silence, you have a choice. You can fill it with judgment, with shame, with fear. Or you can listen. Listen to what your nervous system is telling you. Listen to the unmet needs, the unspoken words, the walls you've built for protection. Desire is not a switch you flip. It is a language you learn to speak again. Slowly, quietly, without demand. And sometimes, in the letting go of the need to fix it, you finally create the space for it to return. You are still here. That is enough for now.